Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, a lot happening in the Gilgo Beach case, the Rex Schuerman case, and of course, we spoke the last time about the press conference given by attorney Johnny Ray, the flamboyant dressing attorney for the family of Shannon Gilbert. And we understood why Rodney Harrison attended that press conference and why he, in fact, is working alongside flamboyant attorney Johnny Ray, because he wants to open barriers of communication that were shut years ago and investigate things that potentially could give the defense reason to create doubt in this case. So when this attorney, Johnny Ray, who represents the family of Shannon Gilbert and has been on this case for 13 years, if he's not listened to by the police department, then that potentially could give reason for the defense to find reasonable doubt or to bring that up. However, someone had a problem with this, namely District Attorney Ray Tierney. Now, I always questioned, and we've been covering this case from the beginning, who is in charge? Is it the Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, or is it District Attorney Ray Tierney? From my school of thought, the police department runs the investigation. That's the way it was in New York City. And you worked with the district attorney's office, but in Suffolk, it seemed like it was the reverse. And Ray Tierney took great umbrage at this press conference. In fact, I'm going to read the statement that he made to the press. Without providing any advance notice to the prosecutors pursuing this case in court, or the Gilgo Beach Homicide Task Force members investigating these murders day in and day out, we watched today's press conference not knowing what was going to be reported. We will continue to investigate this case through the grand jury process and not through press conferences, Tierney said in a statement. Tierney said anyone with potential information should contact law enforcement, including the district attorney's office, police department, or FBI. Any attorneys representing victims or their families, by definition, have a conflict of interest. It should not be part of the investigation, Tierney said. Ullman's attorney, Michael Brown, could not be reached for comment. One of the witnesses, who identified herself as a 54-year-old woman from New York City, said in a sworn statement that she and her former boyfriend, who were swingers, went to a home she believes was Ullman's home in 1996 with a woman who she believes was Karen Vergata. So I don't understand, for all the things that Rodney Harrison, and he dictates who's going to be alongside attorney Johnny Ray and attend these depositions and re-interview the witnesses that Johnny Ray interviewed. And all of that is going to wind up on what we call in the business a complaint follow-up. Every time the detectives interview anyone, they do what's known in New York City, it's called the DD5. But it's called a complaint follow-up. So Ray Tierney and the task force will get copies of all of this stuff. So I don't understand, something in the beginning of this case, you couldn't get Ray Tierney off the press conference. He spent more time on TV than he did in his office. So I don't understand why he's having a problem with Rodney Harrison right now. And this task force has worked well together up until now, although I heard possibly there was some friction between the two. So we're going to touch on a bunch of things today, specifically Ray Tierney and the problem with this, but also attorney Johnny Ray, and also a great article in the New York Times talking about the history of this investigation and how it was doomed from the very beginning because of politics. Is that what this is about right now? Ray Tierney will have to run for re-election, or is he seeking a higher office? I don't believe Rodney Harrison is running for any office. So again, who's running this investigation? Or is it a team, as it should be? Folks, you've just entered the Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories, real crime from a police perspective. Hang on to your hat, buckle yourself into your seat. We're about to go off the cuff. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Joining me tonight to discuss these very important topics is retired NYPD sergeant, an attorney, a professor, Mike Geary. Mike, welcome to the show.
Billy, good to see you. Thank you for having me on this evening.
You know, Mike, some sparks may fly, but let me first bring in straight out of Brooklyn, NYPD retired detective, and I know he's chomping at the bit right now, Phil Grimaldi. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Billy. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good to see you, Phil.
All right, Phil, I'm going to address you first because I know you're straight out of Brooklyn. You're dying to get your 2 cents in here. Who's running this investigation?
Well, listen, from the prosecutor's standpoint, if you're prosecuting the case, once all evidence is turned over, all interviews are done, all witnesses are in the grand jury, now it's kind of like the time when the prosecutor does really take over the case. Now, we talked earlier, Bill, there are times during the investigation when the prosecutor works hand in hand with the police department, specifically in this case, the Suffolk County Police Department. They need search warrants. They need subpoenas for different things. They will also have a threshold that needs to be met in order to make an arrest. So they're going to work in hand in hand. However, this is a very unique case. This is a serial killer case. Now, new evidence has come forward with these affidavits that attorney Johnny Ray brought forward. And so I think that all of that needs to be vetted. It needs to be examined. It needs to be investigated. In my opinion, based on the question you asked me, Bill, right now, the police department is in control of the investigation. District Attorney's Office is not going out doing interviews on witnesses on a homicide. That's the police department's job. Sometimes their investigators will do follow-up interviews, look for witnesses, different things like that. And if they start their own case, sometimes they do have investigators that do stuff like that. However, in this case, this is a major, major investigation. Serial killer. We know of at least a dozen or so victims in this case. So in my opinion, I think the police department is running this investigation.
Okay, Professor Mike.
Yeah, Billy.
Why would Rodney Harrison want to be seen at a press conference with attorney Johnny Ray, who's making these or coming up with these affidavits, sworn statements from witnesses that the police department and the homicide task force doesn't have this information?
Billy, they got the indictment on Hurman for three of the girls' deaths. I think they did a fabulous thing. And everybody knows Rodney Harrison. He knows what he's talking about. He knows what time of the day it is. But I think he also wants to make sure that every single I is dotted, every single T is crossed. So many mistakes were made. And Johnny Ray, for whatever you might think of him personally in terms of, doubting whether or not he's being accurate and sincere, you know what? I think Rodney Harrison has to let him air what he has to say, and also assure the public at this point that all of these previous maybe conspiracies about Rex Sherman killing Shannon Gilbert and things like that, he wants to air them out, and he wants to give everyone a chance to hear what Johnny Ray has to say. And Rodney Harrison is assuring the public that he is open and willing to talk to anyone, anywhere, who's got any information, however, strange or maybe not nearly credible as it may be, he wants to do that. And therefore, I think it's a good thing, as you pointed out at the very beginning of your monologue. The more people you interview and you clear, and the more leads you hunt down, if they go nowhere, okay, that's okay, because even though you've wasted some of your detective's time, it does help prevent a defense attorney, a very wily defense attorney, saying, you had someone else who you were told was a suspect. Why didn't you go after them? I think Rodney Harrison is doing a great job now. And I think it's just a little bit of ego, a fight over ego and FaceTime on TV with Tierney. But Harrison knows what he's doing. He's doing a great job.
I sense more than a little bit of jealousy and more than a little bit of, I'm the boss type thing. But guess what? The DA is not the boss of the police commissioner. The police commissioner calls the shots with the police department. Does Ray Tierney believe he's the boss of this task force? I mean, he's the prosecutor. I have to think that this case has smelled of politics from day one. Is he now injecting more politics into it? Because guess what? He's an elected official. Rodney Harrison goes at the will and the pleasure of the county executive. And Rodney Harrison could be looking for a new job in November. I believe Ray Tierney will be running for re-election or possibly for a higher office at some point. But is that what this is all about? Or is it about the case and the prosecution of Rex Schuerman?
Billy, I think that what Rodney Harrison did was he embraced Johnny Ray coming out with all of these specific, he said he had affidavits. He was talking about conspiracy theories from early on. He believes that Shannon Gilbert was murdered, perhaps by Rex Schuerman. However, I think Rodney Harrison is of the opinion, and the investigation reveals that it was an accidental death. So I think he's going to embrace it. Let's hear what he has to say. That's why I think he went and stood with him in that press conference. He wants to, like you said, Bill, and like Mike said, we're going to look at all the different leads. We're going to investigate them. Are they credible? Is there substantial, evidence that could link Rex Schuerman to Shannon Gilbert? Was it, in fact, Shannon Gilbert? He seems to be convinced that that specific person met Shannon Gilbert. But again, is it her? We don't know. He's coming out with a lot of conclusions. That's what the investigators are for. They have to vet this information, and perhaps there is a link. And if there isn't, when it comes down in court, we can't have a defense attorney pointing a finger at someone and saying, you never looked at this. Here was this evidence. This Johnny Ray, the attorney, was giving you this info, and that's the real killer. No, we looked at it, we vetted it. We've excluded it as being part of it.
And 100% Mike Brown will call Johnny Ray as a witness. 100% he will.
Listen, that guy, Mike Brown, is a sharp defense attorney. He's going to do whatever he has to do to give his client a fair trial when it comes to a defense. And I think that he's up for the task. And again, when you have public statements being made by an attorney and it's not being investigated, you're not doing your due diligence.
This is the attorney for Essa Ellerup, who, based on Johnny Ray's affidavit, someone swore something in the affidavit about Essa Ellerup. Let's see what they have to say here.
Beach serial killer Rex Schuerman. Turns out his estranged wife may have known about his alleged double life, even supposedly accusing one of the sex workers who came to their home of stealing her clothing iron from their home. John Ray, attorney representing victims in this case, spoke today alongside Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison about what a witness told him about the wife, Essa Ellerup.
He was a serial user of sex workers. He would sometimes have them come two at a time to his house, and his wife was home upstairs, and in one instance got very angry at one of the sex workers because the wife believed that the worker had stolen an iron from, for ironing clothes, and had it in the car with the driver.
Bizarre as it sounds, the sex worker allegedly accused of stealing the wife's iron, and that's what she was upset about. The estranged wife, whose attorney will join us in a moment, has not been named as a suspect, but her hair was found on duct tape on one victim and on the head of another, according to court records. The police commissioner did answer questions too. We should point out he was not wearing his police uniform, as he has in past conferences about the case.
We have the information, we're working it, and we'll see where it leads us down the road.
Again, smart for Rodney Harrison to be there and to give Johnny Ray credibility, right? Johnny Ray's been attached to this case for 13 or 14 years. I think Rodney Harrison's being very smart by doing this. Again, Mike, I think he's closing the door on doubt for Michael Brown, the attorney for Rex Heuermann. And I don't see why Ray Tierney's got a problem with this.
Billy, he's as Phil said, he's doing due diligence. He's making sure every loose end is tied up nice and neat so that no defense attorney can challenge the thoroughness of the investigation under any circumstance. I think, Rodney Harrison doesn't look very comfortable standing there next to Johnny Ray, but I think he did a great job. I think it was a smart thing to do overall, despite what the optics are and despite what Ray Tierney has to say. He did a great job.
Everything that's been written on this case, everything's been said on this case, and later on I'll address the New York Times article written by the gentleman who wrote the book, The Lost Girls.
Right.
And he comes up with a lot of new information. Well, not new information, but information about the history of this investigation that was tainted by both politics and corruption. So this probably isn't the time for the district attorney and for the police commissioner to get into a pissing contest, And I don't think it's Rodney Harrison's doing the pissing. I think it's Ray Tierney. And I think they should play well in the sandbox together, because guess what? They made an arrest in this case that was thought unsolvable after 13 years. So all of a sudden, egos being bruised. Phil.
Billy, I doubt very highly that Tierney wasn't notified about this press conference. He chose not to go. That's what my opinion is, that he chose not to go. Perhaps he doesn't want to embrace these wild conspiracy theories that Johnny Ray's coming out with. But again, the due diligence has to be done. And I agree with you, Billy. There shouldn't be a pissing contest at this time. We know that there was some problems in this investigation early on in 2011. There was a lot of corruption with regard to Burke and the Suffolk County District Attorney and different things of that nature. The information was there. However, it wasn't acted upon. Now we had a new breath of life breathed into the case by Rodney Harrison. They formed this task force. Tierney was part of it. I think they were working well as a team. They brought in the FBI. They had all their different forensic examiners and the technology experts with regard to the cell phone activity. So they were able to put enough evidence together to charge the 3 murders. Now it looks like there is definitely a clash of egos, so to speak. But I think, in my opinion, and I'm definitely biased. I know Rodney Harrison. I've spoken with him. He worked for the NYPD, as everyone knows. He attained chief of detectives on the job. I believe he's also chief of department for a period. So I am biased towards him, but I think everything he has done, he has shown himself to be professional. Tierney, on the other hand, I think he's probably a very capable attorney, but it seems like he never never met a camera he didn't love.
That's for sure.
In another case. Now, joining me now is Robert Macedonio, attorney representing Macedonio. I apologize. I actually practiced it before I started too. Who joins us now? I appreciate it. All right, you've got a lot to respond to here. Let me just let you respond to what we just heard.
Dan, I think the DA's statement says it all. It's hard to take anyone serious wearing a purple hat at a press conference. Johnny Ray has tried to keep himself relevant in this case since the arrest of Rex Heuermann. It's been stated several times, not only by the police commissioner who stood by him, by the DA's office, that Shannon Gilbert, who's Johnny's client, is not related to any of the other Gilgo victims. So what he's desperately trying to do is link a civil defendant to his clients, so he has somebody to sue to recoup the tens of thousands of dollars he has spent chasing his tail the past 12 years that he's been involved in this case.
So is it not true?
Completely outlandish claims. I categorically deny him on behalf of Asa Ellerup. It's just ridiculous.
So again, yeah, just to follow up on that, not true that she knew about the sex workers.
It's not true. Look, taking an iron. You're going to fight with someone taking an iron. You go back. The allegations go back several years ago. The children are 34 and 26 now. So they were what? Teens, if not younger. The house is very small. Everybody's seen the house. So the allegation is small children are upstairs in the house while Rex has sex workers downstairs in the house. It makes no logical sense. It's a nice middle-class neighborhood. The houses are all very close together. Any of this would have been witnessed by any of the neighbors. It makes no relevant sense. Like I said, you go back to the purple hat. He looks like he's more trying out for a part in the Willy Wonka movie than he is representing any victims.
What about the hair allegedly, her hair allegedly on the duct tape
I don't
of
mean
one
to
of
laugh.
the victims?
Well, you have the hair, but hair is of likeness. Until we get actually DNA reports, which none of us have seen, you could have a hair of likeness. The DNA comes from the root of a hair. I don't think any of that's been actually laid out in court. It's a hair of her likeness. So we'll wait to see the evidence comes out in court and really let this case be tried in the courtroom and not by Johnny Ray at the press conferences. In addition to the police commissioner, come the first of the year, is no longer going to be the police commissioner. We have a new county executive that's going to be elected, and they're going to appoint their own police commissioner. So again, Rodney Harrison not wearing his police uniform, not in coordination with the DA's office who's run this task force. And to go back to Ray Tierney, Ray Tierney is probably the most qualified and non-political district attorney we've had in Suffolk County. So I trust his judgment. I trust the task force. We will do a thorough investigation. And to have John Ray bring out some victim that says they took an iron out of the house, had a fight with Asa Elrup, it's ludicrous.
Bob Macedonio.
You know,
I haven't saw him once wear a uniform since
he's an ambulance chaser too. This guy. He showed up. He showed up to represent Asa Elrup because the police wrecked their house. In the search warrant. Come on. Also, he was in the low weeds picking up this case.
Attacking Rodney Harrison for not wearing his police uniform. He's the police commissioner. I haven't seen him in his uniform as Suffolk County Police Commissioner once yet. Well, how is that relevant? That's not relevant to his expertise in law enforcement or his knowledge in law enforcement. So please give me a break with that.
Professor Mike, what do you think?
Billy, every attorney that's not a public official like a district attorney is a hired gun. And that's just the way it goes. He's representing Asa Elrup, and he's doing the best job he can. He's going on the offensive. And of course, it's easy pickings to pick on Johnny Ray. All right, yeah, the guy dresses like he's from the 1970s, but the fact is,
you said Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I'm old enough to remember that movie.
I said he looks like a character out of a Dr. Seuss book, but
right.
But I get criticized for that too, but I don't care. I think it's funny, and we're gonna have a laugh once in a while.
Yeah, you got to have a little levity.
Yeah.
It's hard to take him serious with the purple hat. I get it, believe me.
Right. Yeah, but if he does provide a little help by helping the district attorney and helping the police commissioner close every single possible avenue of arguments for a defense attorney in the future, if he does just that, then Johnny Ray has done a great service. But also he did say one thing, Mr. Macedonia, is that Johnny Ray is trying to stay relevant. He does want to get paid someday for all the hours he puts in. But I don't like to see it. Just one attorney attacking another, and it's just
you don't normally see that either, Mike. You don't normally see attorneys attack one another, very
not
rare.
like this. Not like this. It's almost like a civil case, where they're attacking each other. But Asa is going to have some issues with finances and the home and everything else, and getting divorced and maybe some sort of settlement with Rex, but it'll never be enforced because he doesn't have any money, So he's the guy is doing what he can for Asa Elrup, making sure that she's not dirtied up at all. So he's doing his job.
This is a synopsis of what Johnny Ray said. The first witness went to Ewan's house for a sex party in February 1996 with her boyfriend, who was a cop, and Karen Vergata. Ewan's wife, Asa Elrup, was at the house when they arrived, the witness said in an affidavit. The witness said that Vergata went downstairs and that Ewan and her boyfriend vanished for a while. During that time, she spoke with Ellerup, who said that Uhrman had brought her from her country and that everything she had, he has given her, the affidavit states. Ellerup also allegedly told the witness that she was afraid of Rex. At some point, the witness decided to leave with her boyfriend, who told her Vergata was staying to play a game with Uhrman. Before they left, Vergata suddenly ran outside naked and ran about the garage, according to the affidavit. The witness said she never heard about Uhrman or Vergata again until the architect was arrested in June. What do you think of that? That's witness number one.
You're pitching it to me?
Go ahead. Take it, Phil.
Well, listen, witness number one has a lot to say about different areas of this thing that took place in the Uhrman house. And how do we know it's the Uhrman house? How do we know that that was his wife? I mean, did she identify her as the wife? A woman in the house could have been another sex worker. There's a lot of different things that need to be.
Well, Phil, one part that I didn't list was that they put a sign in a club, in a sex club, that anyone interested in participating come to my. I mean, first of all, would a potential serial killer be advertising in a sex club?
I doubt that very highly, Bill. And again, it's out of character from what we know about Rex Uhrman. He seemed to be very cautious when there was that incident where he went to a sex worker's house and they tried to pull a scam on him and he hightailed it out of there. You know, I don't think he's the type of personality that's going to be putting his name and address up on a wall of a sex club to swing or something like that. So again, all of these things need to be vetted. They need to be looked at, and if there's corroboration there, then they'll move forward with that and they'll lead it into being connected to the case. But if they can't corroborate it, then it's going to wind up being, looked at. Listen, a witness comes forward 23 years later and comes out with statements. They may believe these things, but are they correct in the facts? Were they in fact at Rex Uhrman's home? Were they in fact talking to Rex Uhrman? These are the things that need to be answered, and it's not easy, but it's not super difficult. Good investigators will be able to look into this. Perhaps there's some cell phone technology or other things that they could look at as far as physical evidence. But again, the memory sort of that period of time, it starts to get a little bit cloudy, so to speak.
Absolutely. I want to read the second witness. Ray said the second witness, a banker who moonlights as a taxi driver. I find that a little bit doesn't fit in the same sentence. One saw Gilbert and Uhrman together when she picked her up in the fall of 2009. So she's alleging here that she saw Uhrman with Shannon Gilbert. That is like, if that were true, that is like blockbuster information. That is like, whoa, someone saw Rex Uhrman with Shannon Gilbert? But in the way the night that Shannon Gilbert disappeared went down, there's no way Rex Uhrman was the one that did it. But if it is in fact a murder, because so many people were around that night that saw Shannon Gilbert. She went to at least 3 houses as she was running away. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Billy, the second witness puts her seeing as in the taxi cab, sees her seeing someone she believes to be Shannon Gilbert in the fall of 2009. Gilbert goes missing May 1st, 2010. So, even if she was the right person, she got the right ID. It's like 6 months, 8 months later. But you remember Johnny Ray he's promised the Gilbert family, that he would make this connection with Rex Uhrman, and he's trying his best to do it. And maybe the taxi cab driver banker is sincere, maybe she's not, but I don't think she's very accurate. Remember, this is all at night. This is from years ago, and she sees someone who she claims by looking at maybe pictures that she sees on the internet is Shannon Gilbert. I can't really put a lot of faith in that ID. I think it's too speculative at all.
Yeah, I just want to read a little bit more of the.
Bill, let me make a quick comment, Billy.
Go ahead.
When Johnny Ray was given the press conference, he talks about that cab driver, and she said that the person who came out, who she described as very large person, had his arms raised in front of his face, so she can't ID his face. And then Johnny Ray said his exact words were, "He left in a van." Well, I mean an SUV. So he changed up right there. Which one was it? Was it an SUV or was it a van? And again, I don't think that you have a witness that can say that that was Rex Human. Perhaps it was Shannon Gilbert. She was in the sex trade. Perhaps she really was out there. Perhaps she did get into some type of a situation that night. However, was it Rex Human that night? I think that that's very unclear at this point, and I don't think there's any corroboration of the fact that it was him. He said, think about it, and if you played back at the press conference, first he says a van, then he goes, well, I mean an SUV. He caught himself there.
In the affidavit, the witness says that she was dispatched to the Sayville Motor Lodge. Guys, and I'm giving a synopsis. I'm not saying if you actually listen to Johnny Ray's press conference, he is so all over the place. You need you really need to write everything down to understand what he's talking about, because he states one thing and says another thing. So this is a synopsis. So she was dispatched to the Sayville Motor Lodge to pick up a female passenger who had locked herself in the bathroom. When she arrived, she said she waited several minutes before a very large man ran out of the room and a woman entered her car crying and shaking. In the car, the woman told her she'd been lured there by a man for a job. But when she got to the motel, he handed her an envelope of paper scraps instead of money. Later, the affidavit says the witness realized that the woman she had picked up was Gilbert and the man was Human. The witness said she had another incident with Human in October 2009 when she picked him up at a bar off exit 59. When he got into the car, the witness said in the affidavit he told her they were going for a long ride in the woods and said they needed to pick up a girl who lived in a car across the street. When the witness questioned Human, he got angry with her and said he wanted to kill her if she gave him a reason to do so. He insisted he wanted to kill me, the witness said in the affidavit. I heard him click a gun during the incident, which ended up with Human getting out of the car. He claimed that he was a Brooklyn cop, the witness said. I mean, it's just all over the place. I don't know how, if Rodney Harrison is going to have detectives re-interview these affidavit signers, and they have to get the NIATWI, and we all know that means the when, the where, the who, the what, the how, and the why. Because, Mike, as you said, she's 6 months or a year too early, right?
Right. And you got to remember, too, look where she's going to the motel. There's a lot of crazy characters out and about that motel on many occasions, especially on the weekends, over the course of a long time. And if she's been driving a cab in that area, she's probably picked up many Johns and prostitutes and pimps out around that area. There's a colorful cast of characters. Everybody's all made up. Everybody's got makeup on. Everybody's got the hair done. And she's trying to pick somebody out who she saw late at night. And as Phil said, the guy had his hands in front of his face. She never actually identified him as Rex Human. And so that's a good point, too. Who knows who this couple was?
Good point. It's just amazing. When you also, I wanted to reference the New York Times article that was published 2 days ago by the gentleman who wrote the book, The Lost Girls. So he's highly experienced in this case. And one of the things he did mention, which I found interesting, was Schaller, the roommate of the roommate of
Amber Costello.
Amber Costello, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he said that, Schaller has been on press conferences. He's been interviewed. He says clearly, I saw the green avalanche and I identified Rex Human. This writer in the New York Times said he was so blasted on heroin, he said he didn't even walk around. He never saw the guy.
That's right.
So you have to vet all of this stuff, because people say things and then they change up, like this guy Schaller. He was a drug addict. And,
right.
Now that he's, I guess, straight and he's sober, he's remembering things that also are self-promoting himself, making himself look like a hero when really he's not a hero. and all of a sudden, again, he's trying to become relevant.
Right. Remember, Bill, he also said at one point in some previous press conference or interview, that he actually put up his dukes and challenged Rex Heuermann to a fight, and Heuermann actually backed down. That's inconsistent too with some other things that he had said previously about jumping into the house to scare Heuermann, and Heuermann ran out of the house and then texted her saying that wasn't very nice. So you got three different versions from a guy who is strung out on heroin, who's the pimp of the girl who went missing.
Right.
It's credibility is shot.
Mike, people in the chat are saying, "Oh, I still only believe there's one killer." I still believe Rex Heuermann is the guy. I do.
Oh,
I don't believe anything to do with Shannon Gilbert. I don't
Right.
believe that at all. If you really look at that case, he couldn't have done that one. But I believe all of the other ones, absolutely. But there's a thing called evidence, evidence. And if you don't have evidence, you can't charge someone. And that's what we're trying to say. And I'm not trying to put down Johnny Ray, but those depositions he took, they were all over the place. They were not even, I mean, I would love to meet Johnny Ray and say, Mr. Ray, if I, as a police officer, detective, or sergeant, delivered the statement that you delivered, you would rip me to shreds. Time, place, what, how, where, when, what. There's none of that. And it's all over the place. You need to take this huge statement and start bringing it in. Bring it in. You need to bring it in because it's all over the place. Phil, it's true.
Yes. No, I agree. Listen, if it was roles reversed and he was questioning you on the stand and you were coming out with these type of statements and you're hanging your hat, a man's life that's going to go to jail for 25 to life or more, in this case, probably forever, he would definitely rip you to shreds on that. But, I want to lend credence to the fact that there is a possibility that, this area could have been a dumping ground that perhaps one of the victims or maybe more of the victims weren't done by Rex Heuermann. However, they are consistent that they were all sex workers. They were all, except for the one male that was dressed as a woman, all females, all in the same, general description, physical description. So again, it's leaning towards, it looks like it's Rex Heuermann that's responsible for all of these. However, it's a desolated area. It's like an open marsh area, very, very dark at night. So is it possible someone else did it? Yeah, I guess that's possible. But in my opinion, I agree with you, Billy. I think he's responsible for all of them, but we have to leave the door open that possibility exists. There could be somebody else that dumped the body there, unfortunately.
Phil, something, some of the things also in these depositions, in these sworn affidavits, they make no sense as per the personality of a serial killer.
Right.
Oh, take me to the woods. He's got a gun. He fires a gun. That makes no sense.
Right.
No sense at all. And, and then she made a statement. She thought he was a New York City cop. I was just like, this thing is like, whoa, it's all over the place. It's like, get some detectives in there, re-interview her, and let's get to the bottom of this stuff.
Billy, not only that sounds to me like a drunken incident. Somebody comes out of a bar, probably drunk, perhaps maybe even on drugs. Some type of an incident takes place, firing shots. That's not the MO of Rex Heuermann. You're 100% right, Billy. It's not his MO. That's not the MO of a serial killer. And again, you can go back to that location. You can talk to the dispatcher. You could talk to people in the bar. Like I said, maybe there's a house across the street with some person living there that remembers something like that. It was an obvious incident that took place that I do believe this cab driver did go through some type of an incident. Is it Rex Heuermann? I think it's very doubtful.
The writer of the New York Times article, Robert Kolker, I just wanted to get back to this because, look, we've been accused, we're cops, that we protect other cops. And sometimes that's true. But as we look at this case, this serial killer, the Gilgo Beach murders, going back, if you go back to Karen Vergata and include that one, it's 26 years ago, 27 years ago. There were so many mistakes made. And I never wanted to believe that it was a cultural thing. And what does that mean? The culture of the Suffolk County Police was that they didn't give a shit about these women because they were sex workers. they were escorts. I never wanted to believe that. And I still don't want to believe it, but it appears that there is some evidence to that. Also, when we look at the case, some of the huge pieces of evidence that popped up that they somehow just disregarded. And a lot of that has to do with the P word, politics, And I remember someone said to me one time, oh, I don't want to talk about politics. I said, dude, the P in police stands for politics, because the police, their whole conduct, everything is governed by politics. Every politician has their hand in policing some way, or telling the police what to do sometimes for their own purposes, which was evident in this case. This guy Spoda, who was the DA. And then, of course, Burke, who came in, that was Spoda's guy. And nothing was done on this case for years. And even before Burke got in, the investigation wasn't doing. The guy Dorner, who seemed out of his league, the commissioner, he just did no way. He had this Irish brogue. No way do we have a serial killer. We don't have some guy with a dripping knife.
And again, politics played right into that decision, Billy. I'm certain of it. And politics played into the decision that Tierney didn't go to this press conference. He felt that, his position, he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be standing next to the guy wearing a red hat, I guess. But whatever it is, it's definitely politics. Billy, you really, really hit the nail on the head. Anything involved in policing, every move we make is always being judged by the powers that be over at, we call it the Puzzle Palace in police headquarters, and the politicians who hire the main people in the Puzzle Palace, the police commissioner. They always have a hand on what's going to be let out to the public, how things are going to be handled. And with a case like this, politics really needs to step aside. This is a very, very important case.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, what are you waiting for? Go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font, they're part of our YouTube channel members, and we really appreciate our fans, our subscribers, our friends, and they support this channel. And we're growing. We just hit 55,000. Hopefully we'll double that at some point. Schmitty, thank you so much for being a member for 24 months, 2-year mark. Yay, good work. Well, thank you. Thank you for your support. Very much appreciated. So I want to go back to the beginnings of this case, Mike, and I know you're an academic. You were all over that New York Times article. And just in the beginning, when I read some of the things that the big bosses on the Suffolk County Police Department didn't know about the Green Avalanche. The big bosses didn't know, or at least they said they didn't. The big bosses didn't know about the burner phones. The big bosses didn't know so many things. And we're like, well, who did know about this stuff? The other thing was, which was outrageous, and Rodney Harrison found this out when he took over, none of the DD5s, none of the complaint follow-ups, none of the investigative paperwork was digitized. So it was all like thrown in the corner like the old NYPD, and it wasn't on a computer where it wasn't searchable. So think of a voluminous case like this that's not searchable.
Yeah.
You got roast beef hero meat in the DD5s with mayonnaise, and instead it should be on a computer database that you can search.
Yeah, Billy, this from the very, very beginning, the first time that they found the bodies, and over the course of a couple of days, they found like maybe a week, they found 4 bodies. And what does the chief of police, Dorner, have to say at a press conference? We can't really say that there's a serial killer running around with a knife. Look behind you. There's 4 dead women's bodies dug up, all wrapped in the same place, all laid out like in a graveyard here. And this is what he's saying: bad start, completely a bad start. He leaves, and his boss at the time was Steve Levy, who was there as the executive, and you had Dormer. Dormer leaves. Dormer's in over his head. You got Spoda comes in. Spoda is a very good friend of Burke, and Burke had about 1 year, apparently, according to his article, where things were quiet, and then he got in trouble with by beating up the guy who was the thief. He's being investigated by the feds. They claim now, some of the investigators claim now to the writer for the Times that they had no idea about the Chevy Avalanche. They put it down to possibly a misclassification of the vehicle in the computer, and therefore they didn't pick up on it. But, and later on, and then it suggested that later on, better computer equipment, better technology, and they ran it again in 2022. They discovered this lost report. As you say, Billy, it was not digitized. It was who knows how it was found underneath the coffee maker or something like that. And
underneath the coffee, that's a good place to look for it.
Yeah, right. In the police department, anything underneath the coffee.
You guys are dating yourselves now.
It's under the donut box.
But you're getting this problem, and then, as they say in the article, the culture surrounding the investigation was at a standstill. It appeared that when you look at it in total, Burke didn't really care if the case was ever solved. It was a lot of apathy. Senna, when the new person came in as the police chief, he wasn't well respected because he was looking into previous allegations of impropriety by the detectives out there. It was a total cluster freak of different factions fighting each other out in Suffolk County. It was pathetic.
Okie dokie, great question. Are DD5s numbered or accountable, or do they have the ability to go missing? I wonder. You know something, okie dokie? Back then, they had a huge ability to go missing. But that's why you need these cases digitized, because once the report is in there, no one can pull it out. Back in the day, a detective might do a report and say, "Oh, I didn't really mean that. Let me pull that out." Guess what? Too late. Once it goes into the computer, maybe you could do a DD5 later on that says, "I found out new information that makes the DD5 I did on such and such a date with complaint number, blah, 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 DD5 number, blah, blah, blah." It makes it incorrect or irrelevant. Yes. Yeah. So, you could do that. But did reports get lost? Oh, my God. Yeah. Just ridiculous because, I believe I was in the detective bureau for 16 years in the NYPD. And when we were told everyone in the squad was getting a computer, we were like, no way, because we were still using typewriters. And I used to say back in 2004, 2005, I say the NYPD is still hitting two rocks together to make a spark to start a fire. And they think we're going to get computers. And guess what? We did. And think of how important it is to be able to search complaint reports citywide. If you have a guy named Bad Bart and you're looking for him and you run it and he's killing them in Brooklyn, doing all kinds of crimes in Brooklyn. Oh, look, I found out. You call the detective in Brooklyn. You got a guy named Bad Bart, 6'5", 260, and you give it this. Yeah, he's shooting people. He's doing whatever. But I'm just.
Bill, he could also come up with the DD5 system. You're making a great point here because a person could be standing there at the scene of a crime and they give their name on an interview on a canvas. And now you're looking for a guy and all of a sudden their name shows up on this other crime, but they were there for whatever reason, whether they're involved or not. But again, it's a great, great tool. But Bill, I want to make one other quick point. Whoever it was that took that information on the Green Avalanche, I don't know if they had the knowledge because immediately, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Billy, because you were an investigator about doing a lawman search. That's a very unique vehicle, a Chevy Avalanche. It almost looks like a cross between an SUV and a pickup truck, and there's not a lot of them around. They were popular for a bit. I don't think they make them the same way that they did back then. Now it might be called something different. So again, whoever took that information, if it was a detective from the Detective Bureau and the NYPD, I think they probably would have enlisted the lawman search right away. whoever it was that took it perhaps didn't know about that type of a search that could be done. And it's a very unique vehicle. So I think, it was right there in the case folder. It was the linchpin that wound up bringing the whole case together, so to speak. And unfortunately, it took a long time. I don't know if it was because of the way the case was being handled or documented, how it was being, if it was chronologically being put together. Bill and I talked about it earlier today, that it should have been computerized, digitized, and there should have been a way to, somebody should have been gathering all the information daily and putting it together and maybe having a flow chart or different things like that. That's what we talked about earlier. So again, that lawman search was so pivotal to the whole investigation.
I just want to refer to the New York Times article. All the work Suffolk detectives had done on the case was unsearchable, accessible only to a few detectives who were relying on their own limited memories of the case. We had to collect everything and send it down to Quantico, Harrison told me. So that was big. So they had to get the whole case digitized by the FBI. They didn't even know what they had. The task force was announced on February 15, 2022. On March 14th, they learned about the Chevy avalanche. Now, you just spoke about that lawman search, but the lawman search is very specific. So if someone puts it in incorrectly, you'll never find it. But apparently, the state police detective used a service called TLOXP, a private subscription-based database that accesses more records in more places all around the country. The database was available in 2011 when the police first learned about the avalanche. This search had none of the filing issues of the previous search. A car turned up right away, an avalanche owned by Human at the time the bodies were first found. Boom! Boom! I mean, look, none
Billy,
of
I would have called the auto crime division and I would have gave them the specific type of vehicle, Chevy Avalanche, and I am certain that they would know how to put it in the computer. You're right. If you put it in an SUV or something, you make one little mistake, it's not going to come up. But perhaps auto crime division that does this type of stuff on a daily basis, they would know how to put it in, and I'm sure the assistance would came from them. And I think it could have been found out much earlier. They used a private database. That's great that they did get the information and it was available at the time. I think that state police detective really should be lauded for that information coming up with that.
All of the information that they had, what good is it if only 2 or 3 people know about it? And in my time in the squad, we would have detectives like that would hide shit and real important stuff. They would keep it to themselves and them and their partner, and they wouldn't put it in a
glory hounds.
We used to call them secret squirrels.
Squirrels, yeah.
And they wouldn't put it in the case because they didn't want the boss to find out about it. But it was really selfish and self-serving, and really, when you think about it, stupid. Because don't you want to solve this case? Don't you think it's better to have 22 people working on this case than 2? Because you and your partner are the only ones that know this information that could solve this case. But with the new DD5 system, unless you withheld the reports, you couldn't do that any longer.
Absolutely, Billy. And, when you're working with confidential informants, you want as little people to know about it as possible. But in a case like this, Billy, the information, a detective goes out on his swing and something comes in and somebody wants to take a look at it and it's not in the case folder. Well, then they're not going to know about it. And maybe that could be something pivotal that could lead to an arrest before someone else gets murdered. So,
but wasn't that this whole case? No one was sharing information. No one knew anything. I mean, how did the bosses not know about the Chevy Avalanche?
They excluded the FBI as well. And in a case like this, you definitely need the assistance of the FBI for all of their, their bag of tricks, all their toys, their, the deep pockets when it comes to subpoenas and search warrants and cell phone tower dumps and all of that. So again, to keep them out of the investigation.
What was another problem during this is that cell phone tower dumps and the technology was intimidating for a lot of detectives back then. It was a relatively new technology. It was difficult to navigate. And because they may have been an old timer, I'm not going to do that, but it was some of the most important technology they could have used to narrow down who the perpetrator could be. Also, when we
look how important it was in this case, Billy.
What's
it was
that?
super important in this case. The
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Back in 2011, they were intimidated by it, and when the FBI was kicked off the case, they handed them all of the tower dumps they had, and they were like, "What are we going to do with this?" Well, you shouldn't have kicked the FBI off the case. You know, I want to play a little bit of this. It just explains this case a little better here.
Tracks down people and haunts them.
New details are released in the so-called Gilgo Beach murders case of Rex Heuermann, the man investigators say is responsible for a string of murders that plagued Long Island for years. We're now learning more about two potential victims in the case and Heuermann's relationship with his wife.
Rex Heuermann, I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island.
A serial killer?
After years without answers, Long Island native Rex Heuermann was arrested in July of this year. He now faces 3 murder charges, and investigators say more charges could be on the way.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
Heuermann was taken into custody this summer when investigators announced his connection to the notorious Gilgo Beach murders, a series of unsolved cases that date back to the 2010s.
I'm standing here with my law enforcement partners in the Gilgo Task Force to announce the indictment of defendant Rex Andrew Heuermann, 59 years of age.
Heuermann is now charged in the murders of Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, who were working as escorts at the time of their murders. He's also the prime suspect in the murder of another escort, Maureen Brainerd Barnes. The remains of these victims were recovered in 2010 as investigators searched for missing woman Shannon Gilbert. Her remains would later be discovered in 2011. Also an escort, Gilbert went missing when she traveled to Long Island to meet up with a client. In a frantic 911 call, Gilbert can be heard telling dispatch someone is after her.
What phone number are you calling from?
Somebody's after me. Please.
Are you in Suffolk County or Nassau County?
I'm in Long Island.
Where on Long Island are you?
No.
Years after the Gilgo remains were recovered, Heuermann was arrested thanks to DNA evidence.
Once we were able to get some DNA evidence, which we were able to get off the pizza crust, off that and the box, pretty much solidified that we actually had the right person.
According to court documents, investigators recovered a pizza box Heuermann threw away in January 2023. The Suffolk County Crime Lab analyzed a piece of leftover crust, connecting it to Heuermann. Investigators also found hairs, likely belonging to both Heuermann and his wife, on the bones of multiple victims. Officials also confirm his wife was out of the tri-state area when multiple murders were committed. But according to new information released just this week, Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, knew for years that her husband used escorts. At a press conference on Wednesday, John Ray, the attorney for multiple Gilgo Beach victims, shed new light on the case after revealing new information from multiple witnesses. Ray says the first witness provided a sworn affidavit.
All right, we know all of this.
Yeah.
Amber Gloria, thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. Very much appreciated. One of the things that I have a little bit of a problem with is that many people, many podcasters, many media people are reporting this all as new information. This is like, it's not gospel. This is unvetted information. It may not be true. It totally may not be true for the fact that he had them sign an affidavit. Again, Mike, you explained that the other night on the show. It means nothing. They signed it that they believe it to be true. I believe the moon is made of Swiss cheese. I'll sign an affidavit to that. I believe that. Mike.
Billy, yeah, it's, there's from the very beginning, this investigation was waylaid by somebody, by poor leadership, poor follow-up police working with the FBI, politics from the top on down, it said it was bedeviled by all of these things. And luckily we did have that second search, and they did find the Chevy Avalanche information, and they got it. But there was so many missed opportunities. When you read this New York Times article, the hunting licenses were being looked into, and they kind of like dropped that idea. But Rex Sherman had a hunting license.
How about the firearms database?
The firearms.
He
right.
had 97 gun permits.
Right.
And
That would pop,
that may
that would
be a
pop somebody's
far-fetched thing, but why not look at it?
Right. Because, and I think they would have if they had any indication that perhaps there was a firearm used, but there wasn't, so they didn't bother. The same thing with the hunting. They saw the burlap, but they didn't go do a thorough search of hunting licenses and things like hunting permits and things like that on Long Island. If you did both of those things, Rex Sherman would have been on the list for, as you say, like 90 gun lawfully owned gun permits.
I think he had. Yeah,
crazy amount, and he would have been on a hunting license list. And you had him on the Avalanche. They could have had this guy Heuermann even without the cell tower information. They could have had him in 2013, 2014. If there was only some decent leadership from the county executive to the police commissioner to down to the detectives. And that's the sad part, is it didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be this way.
Well, Mike, you're right. And going back in the history of this case, they didn't seem to want help from anyone.
No.
Because I know lots of detectives that were calling out there, hey, I'll volunteer. I'll work on this. Barbara Butcher, the chief of staff of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, she called them up and said, I'll work on this case for free. We're not interested to see you. They blew her off. Oh, that's great. You just blew off like one of the greatest medical legal investigators in, New York City history. And she volunteered to work for free. And I know detectives that also were like, hey, I'd love to work that case, But it was, as someone said in the chat, it was rotten from the head down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the bosses, there was no head, because it was a rudderless sailboat, that was just hitting the rocks because no one was doing anything. And whenever you rely on one or two detectives, it's not going to work. And that's why when Rodney Harrison came in, and again, that's a bone of contention too. Did he start the task force, or did Ray Tierney start the task force? I think it was a smart idea. I believe it was Rodney Harrison, because I'm a former NYPD, and I want to believe that. He started the task force. All of a sudden, things started to happen. Day one, when they said, is this case solvable? And he said, I believe it is. Who had said that in the 13 years, the 26 years? He was the first guy to say that. And within months, they had the Chevy Avalanche. They had it ID'd. And he clearly gives credit to the female detective from the New York State Police who discovered it. And they found Rex Schumann is that 6'4", 6'6" ogre, who owns that green Avalanche. Now, wow, we have this information and it's starting to make sense. And then you start, the vice starts moving in as you get more and more information. You get the burner phones. You search his computer and you find out he's an absolute pervert. He's searching some really heinous stuff on his computer. And that's how an investigation is done. But again, there was no leadership. There was very poor leadership, and there was poor leadership, and politics took this over. Phil, you want to take care of this?
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Now, listen, guys, if you have need for a criminal defense attorney in the New York City area, there's none better than Joe Murray. Joe Murray is not only a terrific criminal defense attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of defense. He was also on the boxing team, so if he takes your capes, perhaps he can deliver that knockout punch. You can reach Joe at his website, jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702. You could email Joe at jmurray-law.com. Joe is a big supporter of police off the cuff, real crime stories, and we happen to think he's a terrific criminal defense attorney.
Absolutely. We appreciate everything that Joe has done and will keep doing for us. Joe, keep sending me your money. Keep sending me those lawyerly dollars.
Good man, Joe
I
Murray.
want to play a little bit of this with Coffindoffer.
Witnesses have come forward linking Gilgo Beach suspect Rex Huerman to 2 more victims who were both sex workers. But it's the context. And it's also their credibility. The witnesses claim they saw the victims with Huerman and that Huerman's wife may know more than she's letting on. Let's bring in Jennifer Coffindoffer, former FBI and News Nation law and justice contributor. Here are the 2 main. Karen Vergata, 24-year-old. Why? Well, this is the intriguing one. The witness and her boyfriend gave Karen a ride to Huerman's home in 1996. Why? To swing with Rex and wife Asa. Asa didn't want to that night, they say. Claims Asa told her she was afraid of her husband. The witness says Shannon ran out of the house naked. Now, one, that doesn't mean that he killed somebody, but it does bring the wife into the loop of what was known and not known.
Well, it certainly does, Chris. This is the first we've really heard about interaction with the wife being involved in anything other than, Chris, those hairs, right? Which sort of makes her connected in a way that we think is innocent, but isn't innocent. But back to this particular witness. This witness should be able to be corroborated with all these details. In other words, she needs to describe that interior of the house. She needs to describe Asa. What does she look like? What was she like? There's ways to corroborate the story. How about the boyfriend, who was a police officer reportedly? That individual needs to be interviewed. There's a lot of corroboration that can be done to see if witness number 1 is telling the truth.
Right. And when I said witness says Shannon ran out of the house, it's witness says Karen ran out of the house naked. Now, the next witness is a single mother, drove a taxi in 2009. This one is a little bit more of speculation. Thinks Rex killed Shannon Gilbert, which is why I misspoke. Why? Because in 2009, she picked up a shaking, crying girl from Sayville Mortar Lodge. She was a sex worker with Huerman, got in the cab, said, have to get away from him, was given an envelope stuffed with paper instead of money. The witness also picked up Rex another time from a bar. He was with a woman, told her, we're going for a long ride in the woods. She said no, he threatened to kill her. Dispatcher voice came on, scared him. He left the car, went to the woods, and shot his gun off.
Does it make any sense that a serial killer goes and hangs out in bars? Mike, what do you think?
Billy, yeah, Rex he's a control freak. You go to a bar, there's too many people that see you. You don't know who you may get involved with. He's a control freak. He called up these girls on Craigslist and with his cell phone and got them maybe into his home, that sort of thing. And that's where he did his deed. I don't think he's going to be running around firing a gun off and drawing attention to himself. Not at all, under any circumstances. I don't think so at all. It doesn't fit at all.
Me neither. Carly, thank you for this. First, Rex slept with her cop boyfriend in the basement. After that, Rex went to the yard to burn garbage. Then when they were driving away and she was being chased around the house, sounds ridiculous. Carly, I just think that Johnny Ray doesn't know how to write or a statement, because his statement was all over the place. And he has a law degree. Lawyers are supposed to be very precise. I couldn't even follow that. If you watch that press conference, you want to go, you're like, what the hell? What just happened? What did he just say? There's too much going on here. And the job of an investigator is to get to the facts and succinctly and very accurately write it down. And then if it sounds off the wall, revisit the person making the statement to you. Is this how it happened? Or is that how you remember it? I mean, someone could think they remember something and very much believe it's the truth, but it's outrageous,
Billy, what's the first question? If you were taking a statement from that the cab driver, what's the first question you would ask? Because I know what the first question I would ask her. Did you tell anybody about this? And I'm going to go interview that person. I'm going to try and corroborate it. That's what you're there to do. You're there to corroborate what somebody's telling you.
But
So,
Phil,
again,
dates and times are so important too. And there are no dates and times to this. The year was wrong. That's unusable. That's unswearable. Professor Mike,
And
help
Billy,
me here.
Yeah, no. Remember too that maybe these people were out partying and drinking, and I wanted, so, and what home did they go to late at night? Did they go to a human home, or did they go to some other home somewhere on Long Island? And I'm intrigued about the New York City police narcotics detective. You got to know his name, track him down. Where has this all been? Johnny Ray he's waving around a piece of paper, and that's great. And it's a start. People should not conclude anything from what Johnny Ray said. It's a starting place for investigators to corroborate. Like Jennifer Coffendorfer said, you got to corroborate each and everything that you possibly can. It's a great start, but that's all it is. It's a start.
Schmitty, Sergeant Bill, didn't Jeffrey Dahmer hang out in bars? I believe he did. Well, he was he was trolling for young men, So yeah, he did go to these bars to pick up young men. But Rex Heuermann was a whole different type of serial. If again he's innocent till proven guilty, but there happens to be one hell of a lot of evidence. But look, he's got an outstanding attorney, and as we said earlier, that Rodney Harrison, we believe, as former investigators, myself a sergeant in Manhattan North Homicide Squad, 16 years in the Detective Bureau, Phil, a detective in the 6-0 Squad, Intelligence Division, I don't know, a detective for probably more years than I was in the Detective Bureau. We believe that, it was a smart thing for Rodney Harrison, and is still a smart thing, but get his detectives to interview these people that Johnny Ray took the depositions from, took the affidavits from, because that affidavit, you couldn't, oh my God. I mean, it was all over the place. I would like to see the written copy of it, which he gave to the press. That's why I thought it would be available online, but it's not. I didn't see it. I thought the actual printed copy minus the signature of the witness would be on it, but it was nowhere to be found. I couldn't find it. But look, am I the only one that when they listened to the press conference felt that the information was all over the place?
No, I agree with you, Billy. It was I called it a mishmash. There was a lot of different things going on. But with regard to Smitty's last question, we don't think that the modus operandi of the specific serial killer in this case, we believe it to be Rex Heuermann, but whoever he was, doesn't seem like they'd be hanging out in a bar and firing off a gun. That sounded like a drunken incident. And again, Billy, you're right about the press conference. There was a whole lot of stuff in a lot of different directions. And again, maybe he could have went a little further and try and corroborated some of the statements that the people were making. I think once he just locked in on that one person saying it turned out to be Shannon Gilbert, I think that's really what he was after. He was just trying to keep himself attached to this case. Publicly, Rodney Harrison came out and said they didn't believe that she was murdered, Shannon Gilbert. He represents her and her family. Again, lawsuit. They're trying to attach to perhaps come up with a lawsuit to recoup some funds that he probably spent over the years. And yeah, definitely a very wild fact press conference the other day. Yes.
Well, Phil, really no facts. Just
a lot. Well, in his mind, they're facts. In his mind, this is Shannon Gilbert, this is Rex Heuermann, and again, a lot of stuff that it opened doors that need to be looked at for sure. I think we're all in agreement about that, and I think that's why Rodney Harrison was there to embrace it. We're going to look into it, and if it goes nowhere, it goes nowhere. It turns out that they followed up some dead leads, but they've eliminated these people as having relevant information regarding the case. And again, if it goes to trial, it won't be, it won't be exploited by a defense attorney saying, oh, you didn't get the real killer. The real killer is Johnny Ray told us about it,
And when you watch I'll just play a little bit of the press conference. When you watch Rodney Harrison's body language, to me, it says, oh my God,
Yeah.
saying she visited Huerman's Massapequa Park home in 1996. Ray didn't reveal the woman's identity, but did confirm she was a swinger who had sex with Huerman. According to Ray, the witness traveled from New York City to Long Island with her boyfriend sometime in 1996. Along the way, they picked up a sex worker who was, quote, disheveled and hungry. Ray believes this sex worker was Karen Vergata.
She went with her boyfriend out to Long Island, but before they went, her boyfriend picked up a woman in New York, in the city, who had apparently just gotten out of jail, and she was disheveled and hungry, and she was a sex worker. We don't know the details yet of how he came to know her, but he knew her. And she came in the car with the two of them.
Once known only as Fire Island Jane Doe, Vergata's skull was recovered near Gilgo Beach in 2011. She'd gone missing years before, in 1996, the same year her legs and feet were recovered on Fire Island. For decades, Vergata's identity was unknown, but in August of this year, the Gilgo task force announced they'd used a DNA profile to identify the remains. According to the witness, Huerman's wife was home when she arrived with Vergata back in 1996. She alleges Ella Rupp knew her husband had called for an escort. According to a sworn affidavit, as the witness was leaving, quote, I saw the face of a woman I believed to be Karen up against a window at the house. She looked scared. I had a sense that she was calling for help.
But when they leave, as they're leaving, the witness points out that she could see in the window, looking out, the girl that had come with them. And she says to her driver, her partner, what are we doing? Are we taking her? And the partner says, don't worry, they're just playing a game. She stays there, no problem. With that, the girl runs out of the house naked and is running in front of the garage. And now the witness says, hey, shouldn't we be taking her? Something's wrong here. And the driver tells her, nah, they're just playing a game. Leave it. And they leave.
Another witness.
So, I'm reading Carly in the chat. I want to just put what you set up on the screen. Believe it or not, a lot of people believe these affidavits and think JR is solving the cases because a lot of people have no clue about investigation. The statements that he took, if I was the boss of the detective that wrote that, I would send them back for retraining. That's how bad they were. They were horrible. And he's an attorney, and he took those statements, Carly, I don't mean any disrespect to you. I'm just saying the statement was all over the place. It's not, and look, Rex Huerman's not going anywhere. If he did these crimes, they got lots of time to prove it, lots of time to reinvestigate this stuff because he's in Suffolk County Jail right now. And the chances are he's never getting out of, he'll get convicted. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. So I hope they can connect him to all of these cases. But based on Attorney Johnny Ray's affidavits, no one's going to jail over that.
Yeah, just those statements alone are not going to lead to, tying Rex Huerman to these victims. Again, he's coming up with some information. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be vetted. If there's something of evidentiary value, it needs to be looked into. And if it can be brought into this case, if it can be corroborated, then that will be done. And, making these public wild statements, and a lot of people think, oh yeah, because it sounds good. It sounds good. A serial killer. He was involved in prostitution for many, many years. There was this fight, firing shots. It all sounds, like a soap opera-ish. But the bottom line is that we have to stick to the facts here. We know what his MO appeared to be from the time that he was being surveilled over the course of those, let's say, a year or whatever it was when they really got on to Rex Huerman. And again, you have to go where the evidence takes you. Just because somebody says something, they may believe it, doesn't mean that it's true or relevant to the case.
Absolutely. Erica Olson, some of the details seem very odd. like the woman who was running naked but tried stealing an iron, or the big guy wearing hunting clothes in town and then shooting as the cabbie drove off? I don't know. Yeah, either do I. I don't know either. And again, guys, I don't look, I'm suspicious, and I also have worked hundreds of these cases, and I never a statement taken has to be very clear and concise. When Johnny Ray gave that press conference, I didn't know what the hell happened. I couldn't understand. I was just like, because he would refer to people as different people. First, it was this woman and her boyfriend, who was a New York City narcotics detective. Then they picked up Karen Vergata. Then they went out to Rex Schulman's house in Massapequa Park, and the boyfriend doesn't mention the detective. The boyfriend goes downstairs with Rex Schulman, and the girl, he doesn't say it's Karen Vergata. The girl goes downstairs too, while I was talking to Essa Ellerup, and she wouldn't, so it was like he would refer to the people as different people. That's what got very confusing to me. Professor Mike?
Yeah, and at one point, as you just watched Johnny Ray speaking a few minutes ago, he referred to the person that she was in the car with, who was supposed to be her boyfriend, as the driver.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So are we recounting some actual driver who was like somewhere along the line that she was a sex worker and she had a driver driving her to some house for a liaison, or was it actually a boyfriend? And if you're referring to your boyfriend, you're going to call him your boyfriend. If you're referring to your driver, who's maybe like your pimp, you're going to refer to him as the driver or the pimp. But to get the two tangled up, I think there's a number of stories that have melded over the course of many years into each
one
other.
Story, yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's too ambiguous. It's a good start, but like Phil said, you got to go over that and interview everybody and really, because it's not a conclusion. It's just a story. We got to see if it's true or not.
Look, as I said, I would like nothing better than for the Suffolk County Police, the Gilgo Beach Task Force, to be able to pin every single one of these bodies on Rex Schulman. And they have time now to do that because he's not going anywhere. However, to do that, you need what I said sarcastically before, something called evidence. And right now, these statements are not strong evidence. These affidavits are not strong. Mm-hmm. And can the Suffolk County detectives that re-interview these people that gave the affidavits as sworn statements, can they re-interview and make these statements stronger, or totally blow up the statements and say they're not credible at all? This woman is not a good witness. Or they may say, oh yeah, we tightened it up and we believe her. Or they may totally come away and say, there's no way this happened. She doesn't know the time. She doesn't know the date. She doesn't know the location. She's just making an identification based on the fact that she saw pictures of so-and-so. She saw Rex Schulman on TV. That's dangerous for an identification too. A lot of times when we would have a robbery case and you caught the guy the same day, they wouldn't want you to do a lineup that same day that you caught the perp, because there's, is he just IDing him from the guy he really saw, or is he just, so they was want, but we wouldn't do what the district attorney wanted. We would do what the police department wanted. And so identification, and especially eyewitness identification, is a very, very difficult thing these days, and even more difficult now than it's ever been. So for her to say 13 years later, oh, that's him, that's the guy I picked up, and she doesn't even know the date.
Listen, it has to be established, and the investigators will establish whether or not these statements are relative to the case. And that's really, it's cut and dry. They have some work to do. They'll do it, and they can clearly say, in our opinion, we don't believe that these statements are relative to the case, or we do believe, based on these statements, that so-and-so did meet Rex Schulman or Shannon Gilbert. So again, I guess that's time will tell if that happens.
Bella Finn, the Swingers Club was in another era. It was in the 90s, I believe, because that's when
Trapeze Club, I think it
the
was
Trapeze Club, and that was from the 90s. Swinging clubs were the rave in New York City back then. There's a place called Plato's Retreat on the Upper West Side that was famous. And I mean, and after, of course, you know what obliterated sex clubs? The AIDS epidemic.
AIDS, yeah.
And that was it. They no longer exist. But this club, apparently, the Trapeze Club, was near Rex Heuermann's office at that time. It was in the 90s. And I believe Karen Vergata went missing in 1996, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, you know, it's a long time ago. And then that's why this witness is IDing her from 27 years ago. Is that believable, or is that, or do you see a defense attorney going, so you remembered her from 27 years ago? What have you been doing since that day? You know, like a defense attorney would just blow that to smithereens.
You know, Billy, Midtown Manhattan, there's probably dozens of venues that could be related to the sex trafficking world or the sex industry. So again, the fact that it's there is that leads some, suspicion that maybe he did frequent that place. Yeah, you have to look into that, obviously, 100%. But again, it's Midtown Manhattan or Lower Midtown, or wherever it is. The bottom line is that it has to be established if it is him, if it was him partaking in that type of behavior. And again, is the wife involved? I think that's one of the other questions we want to establish, or, determine that, no, she wasn't involved. They cleared her early on. We need to get to the bottom of that.
Right. Brownwin Grogan, we're only hearing a small portion of the full statement, though. Yes, Brownwin, absolutely. But he was telling the story in a press conference. So wouldn't you, if you were an attorney telling a story about a witness and an affidavit, wouldn't you want it to be accurate? That was anything but accurate. It was all over the place. And again, I hope the written affidavit is much clearer than the spoken affidavit that Johnny Ray gave at the press conference. Your thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, Billy, I'm looking at the chat as you're speaking, and people are like, don't you believe anybody? And the fact is, you have to be skeptical as a criminal investigator, because people are making an identification, like, say, the Karen Vergata. The one picture we see of Karen Vergata on the internet is from when she was a little kid. That might be from like the 80s. And so for someone to make a definitive statement that they definitely know that's her, even if it's sincere, maybe actually way off and maybe totally inaccurate, even if sincere. This is a start. It's all it is. And you got to take what people say with a grain of salt, and especially when it's going back 30 years.
Well, Mike, you've sat in a witness stand in a court, raised your hand, and been ripped to shreds by an attorney for little tiny things. So when there was so much glaring misinformation, and I want to answer this question from the chat. Joe South Oz, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Why did Harrison stand with JR in a press conference? Would he be there if he didn't think it may help the case? Does this happen often? Phil, why don't you answer that?
Well, listen, I think what he did was he knew that Johnny Ray was going to go public with these statements. And I think it was probably a better move to stand with him. And I'm sure, I would think almost 100% that they did notify the district attorney's office. They chose not to come. And whether or not he believes it or not, he knew he was going to go public with these statements. It's better to embrace it, investigate it, and determine that it has no bearing on the case. Or, yes, he did come forward with some good information. So, again, we kind of read the body language on Rodney Harrison's face, where he did it looked like he was kind of the opinion that this was a little far-fetched. However, I think he made the right decision. He's going public with these statements. Let's look into it. He's got affidavits. He's got people that can be interviewed. There's a lot of places to go with this. Like I said, we could go back to the bar and interview the people in the bar, do a canvas to see if there's people that lived in those houses near there that remember anything about it. Dispatcher in the car service, he was supposedly on the radio talking and saying, get out of the car. We know who you are, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that person can remember it. Again, you'll establish that something really did take place, and perhaps you can get to the point where you think that it is involving Rex Heuermann or not. And again, I think he made the right decision on that. Does something like that, at the end of the question, she said, does that happen often? No, it doesn't happen often. The police are not going to stand with somebody that's coming up with some crazy conspiracy theory.
And Phil, obviously, Ray Tierney, the DA, didn't like that. We don't talk to defense attorney. He had that whole statement.
There was definitely, in my mind, it sounds like there was a pissing match between the Suffolk County Police and between the district attorney's office.
This is his exact statement. Any attorneys representing victims or their families, by definition, have a conflict of interest and should not be part of the investigation, Tierney said.
Yes, so they're having a difference of opinion, but he's connected to this case for many, many years. He represents Shannon Gilbert. He has a voice in the media. I think that there was no other choice but to embrace him, and let's get it all out on the table. Let's investigate it. Let's find out what he's got. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It sounds to me like the district attorney wanted to just say, listen, we're not going to have any part of this guy and discredit it. But I think he made the right decision. And with this question that's on the screen right now, no, of course eyewitnesses are credible, but you have to vet them. Just because someone tells you something that they saw.
This eyewitness, it's 27 years ago.
Exactly.
So that's got a problem. That's a problem because guess what? All the people that she's IDing, she's seen on TV. She's seen their pictures. So a defense attorney, if she is a witness, defense attorney goes, do you remember them from what you remember 27 years ago? Or do you remember them from seeing them on TV yesterday?
And what is that called? You're creating reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt. Folks, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Most of the time when we come on the scene of a homicide, eyewitnesses are usually interviewed relatively short period of time after the incident takes place when things are fresh in their mind. Sometimes it's days or weeks or months or even years later. However, this is a very long period of time. We're talking over 20 years. So again, it has to be taken with a grain of salt. We're not discounting all eyewitnesses, 100% not doing that. We're just saying that based on this, do we think I believe that cab driver was involved in some type of an incident crazy at this hotel. We know it was, sex workers were there, probably drugs. And she probably was involved in some type of an incident. I mean, if you look at the show Taxi Cab Confessions, you see the things, what goes in the back of a person's cab on a night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, a lot of crazy things. So again, did something happen? Yes. Is it relevant to this case? That's the answer that we need to find out.
Schmitty, thank you for the $2 super sticker. Folks, it's our job to just give you both sides of this. And we've done this work before. So when we hear some of the things that are occurring in this case, even, we started out the show with basically the power struggle between Ray Tierney and Rodney Harrison. I think it's more on the side of Ray Tierney is more threatened by Rodney Harrison than vice versa. But it seems like they're not playing well in the sandbox anymore. And we wanted to point that out. But we also wanted to point out how what Rodney Harrison did in regards to Johnny Ray, the attorney, was probably very smart and a wise thing to do. And, guys, we've been here for an hour and 33 minutes. I'm going to give you guys last rights, last thoughts, and then we'll say sayonara. Mike, you go first.
Bill, I think that all of the viewers here and people tuning in should just realize we're not criticizing Johnny Ray and saying personally he doesn't know what he's doing. We're just saying he's got a vested interest in this. He's trying to connect the Gilbert case to Rex Heuermann, and he's got a witness who's actually saying something that actually serves the Gilbert family's interest and Johnny Ray's interest. These statements that do that are, decades old, and they're statements, they're stories, they're a great beginning. The police are going to actually have to go out and interview everyone to see if these stories are actually credible and part of the Heuermann, the Rex Heuermann, serial killer. Are they relevant to the Rex Heuermann serial killer case. They might be totally irrelevant. They might be totally wrong. They might be just wild stories that people have combined many stories into one over the course of years. But this is where I think Rodney Harrison did the right thing. He gave Johnny Ray the ability to go out there in public, and he probably now has the ability as the police investigator. Harrison has the ability to close off all those last minute loops and loose ends and tie them all up and say, we got it. There's no other stories out there. There's no other conspiracy theories that people can believe. You don't want to leave things unattended and taken care of for a defense attorney to come in later on at court and start discrediting all of Rodney Harrison's detectives. So I think he did a great job.
100%. Phil, your thoughts, your final thoughts.
What is the number one thing that we want in this case? Isn't it justice for the victims? That's what it comes down to.
Yes.
We need justice for the victims. Now, Johnny Ray, nobody was giving him the time of day while he was jumping up and down over the last several years trying to connect Shannon Gilbert to this case. When Rodney Harrison came into the case, he said he didn't believe that she was a victim of a homicide. There probably was a powwow between Harrison and Johnny Ray, and he said, hear me out. He heard him out. He's going to listen to what he has to say. He's going to have detectives interview these witnesses, and we're not going to get off into the weeds on this case. I am sure they will determine whether or not these statements are credible to this investigation. Not that they happened. I'm sure some of those things definitely happened, whether it's related to this case. And again, justice for the victims. That is the number one goal in this case.
Folks, these are the victims that Rex Heuermann, the three underneath, he's being charged with: Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. And they're building the case against Maureen Brainerd Barnes. We never want to forget the victims or the other 7 victims that they have yet to been able to connect to Rex Heuermann. Folks, a lot of times we're playing devil's advocate and we're saying what happens in these cases. I have no disrespect for Johnny Ray. I did find his press conference a little bizarre, but in a strange way, he kept this case alive for 13 years by being a pain in the ass to the police. So good.
That's right.
He made them do their job. And, if that's all he did, then he did a great job. But, we have to understand he wants to make money. And, so far in this case, with the 13 years he's been on it, he hasn't made a dime. So, he wants his payday. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.